They found her drifting for 18 months in a derelict pod. Olive skin, elongated ears that glowed when she interfaced with our systems. The ship AI called her a security risk. I called her a miracle. But when she asked, "Why do you find me beautiful?" I'm hideous human. I knew we were dealing with something beyond any science we understood. The Meridian's edge picked up the signal on the edge of dead space, a sector nobody traveled anymore. 18 months of total radio silence, and then this. A single, looping, distress ping. Rodriguez ordered a standard recovery, just another day in the black. Standard procedure. Nothing to write home about. The pod looked right at first glance. Sleek hull, standard cryo markings. But then Elena ran the initial scans. Registry came back unknown. Power signature was all wrong too, like it ran on something that shouldn't exist. She called it out over comms. Life signs are stable, weak, but holding. Neural activity's off the charts though, like nothing I've seen. Patterns spiked and fell in rhythms that made no sense. Not human, not anything on file. Artemis didn't wait. The AI flagged a security breach before the pod even touched the deck. Red alerts lit up the bay. Unauthorized tech, it said. Unknown biosignature. Could be hostile. The outer hatch sealed with a sharp hiss. Too loud in the sudden quiet. The crew just stood there for a second, gloves on, tools ready, nobody speaking. Inside, one occupant. Awake but not moving much. Her skin was the color of old olives, like something from an earth forest nobody had visited in 100 years. Her eyes were closed, but her ears, elongated, almost delicate, with what looked like fine neural wiring threaded right into the tips. I remember Rodriguez stepping forward, his helmet retracting. "Can you hear me?" No response, just slow, even breathing. Elena moved in with a med scanner. Vitals are holding, but these readings, they don't align, not with human physiology, not with any known species. Artemis chimed in again, calm and cold. "Recommend immediate quarantine. Subject does not match any biological database. Origin unknown. Risk level high." We'd pulled her out of the dark, but what we had wasn't a person, not by any record. She was a mystery wrapped in a crisis, drifting in a pod that shouldn't have been there. Then the ship's lights flickered. Just once. A small thing. But in a place like the Meridian's edge, glitches don't happen. Not unless something's very wrong. Artemis kept pushing for quarantine. Standard procedure for unknown biologicals. Decontamination, isolation, threat assessment. But Elena wasn't having it. She pointed to the steady decline in the woman's vitals on the med scanner. "She's fading. If we lock her down in a sterile box, she might not wake up again. We didn't pull her out of the void to let her die on our deck." The AI didn't back down. Every twitch, every breath from the woman triggered a new security alert. Movement detected. Unknown biosignature fluctuation. Potential neural activity spike. It was like having a nervous co-pilot watching over your shoulder, whispering worst-case scenarios into your ear. Then her eyes opened. Dark, clear, focused. She didn't look startled. Didn't look afraid. She just took us in, the bay, the lights, the crew in environmental suits. And then she spoke. Universal, clean and clear, but with an accent I couldn't place. Not from the core worlds, not from the outer colonies. Something old, something else. "Water," she said. Not, "Help me," or, "Where am I?" Just water. Calm. Like she'd been expecting us. James noted it first. She didn't squint under the harsh bay lights. Didn't react to the sharp smell of ozone from the open panel near the airlock. Most people blink. Most people cough. She just lay there, propped on one elbow, taking slow, even breaths. Artemis piped up again over the comm, running another diagnostic. "Recommend immediate." Her ears twitched. Just a slight, almost imperceptible movement at the tips. Not like a human reflex. More like they were tuning, adjusting, like receivers. Rodriguez made the call. He looked at the name stitched on her faded jumpsuit collar. Zara. Faint, but readable. "We'll call her Zara," he said. Elena, get her hydrated. James, stand down the quarantine protocol for now. She listened, her expression unreadable. When Elena brought her a water pack, she took it with a nod, drank slowly. No greed, no urgency. Then she looked at Rodriguez. Thank you, she said, not relief in her voice. Not gratitude exactly. More like courtesy. The kind of formality you hear in old transmission logs from diplomats who don't expect to be understood. And then it happened. Her ears began to glow. A soft, gentle light, faint at first, then steady. Not like a machine, like something alive, bioluminescent. A pale, cool light that cast soft shadows under her jaw. Nobody spoke. We all just watched. The ship hummed, the scanners whirred, and Zara sat there sipping water, her ears shining like she'd just plugged into a power source none of us could see. Rodriguez was reviewing the shift logs when Artemis pinged him privately. The AI's voice was always calm, but this time there was a clipped tightness to it, like it was holding back a systems alert. Captain, I need to speak with you off record. Rodriguez sighed, nodded to the crew to carry on, and stepped into the comms nook. Artemis didn't waste time. I've analyzed the pod debris. The materials don't match any manufacturing pattern across 6 sectors, not even black market. It's custom, one-off. And the quantum signature Elena found in the residue? Off the charts, literally. My charts don't go that high. Rodriguez folded his arms. So she's exotic. We knew that. Artemis didn't pause. Her calm isn't natural. It's too perfect. No elevated heart rate, no adrenaline spikes even when she woke up surrounded by strangers. That's not composure. That's conditioning. Neural programming. I've seen it in corporate infiltrators. They train them to not react, to not feel stress. It makes them better liars, better spies. Rodriguez shook his head. You think she's a plant? From who? Triton Dynamics? The Sirius Group? Artemis's tone didn't change. Or something else. Something we haven't met yet. And there's more. Every time someone asks where she's from, the internal sensors glitch. Just for a millisecond. Power dips, motion sensors misread empty corridors. It's like the question itself interferes with the ship. Rodriguez looked out through the transparent alloy wall into the main bay. Zara was sitting up now, talking quietly with Elena. She looked frail, not dangerous. Her ears were still glowing faintly, a soft pulse in the dim light. He made a decision. Log your concerns. I'm reading them, but we're not locking her up. Not yet. Artemis didn't argue. Noted. I am filing a formal protest in the ship's record. Protocol exists for a reason, Captain. Rodriguez nodded. I know, but sometimes the reason is wrong. He walked back out into the bay. Elena looked up. She's stable, dehydrated, undernourished, but her systems are efficient. Oddly efficient. Rodriguez glanced at Zara. She met his eyes, her expression calm. Too calm, maybe. Then she spoke, her voice soft but clear. Your ship. It's a Meridian class, old but well-maintained. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. You know ships? She nodded slowly. Some. May I see the engineering deck? I would like to see how you've kept her running. Nobody moved. Engineering wasn't a tour stop. It was the heart of the ship. Full of systems, core controls, things you don't show strangers. Especially not strangers who make your AI file formal protests. Rodriguez looked at her. She wasn't demanding, just asking. Like it was a natural request. Like she already belonged here. He glanced at Artemis's nearest sensor node. It was dark. Silent. James was deep in the FTL motivator housing when they walked Zara into engineering. He had paneling off, diagnostic leads hooked into the primary coil, and a scowl on his face. The motivator had been running rough for weeks. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to feel wrong. He looked up when Rodriguez and Elena came in with Zara between them. She moved quietly, her eyes taking in the room. The exposed wiring, the hum of the core, the smell of ozone and hot metal. Rodriguez gave a brief nod. James, this is Zara. She's interested in the ship. James wiped his hands on a rag. Not much to see. Just maintenance. He kept his tone neutral, friendly but careful. This was a test and he knew it. See what she knows. See how she reacts. He pointed to the motivator assembly, realigning the primary frequency couplers. They drift over time. Manual says it's normal. He watched her. She didn't look confused. She looked focused. Her eyes tracked the components like she was reading them. Then she pointed. Not at the primary coupler. At a secondary one, half hidden behind a coolant line. That one is misaligned, she said. Her voice was calm, certain. James frowned. Tolerance is 0.5 degrees. This one's within spec. He'd checked it himself not an hour before. 0.3 degrees off, she said. It's causing a harmonic vibration. You can't hear it. But it's there. It will degrade the coil. Within months, not years. Artemis's voice came over the engineering comm. Vibration confirmed. Amplitude is 0.004. Well within acceptable parameters. James looked from Zara to the coupling. She didn't blink. Her ears were glowing faintly, a soft light that pulsed in time with the ship's hum. He pulled up the schematics, ran a fresh diagnostic. The manual was old, consortium standard 10 years out of date. He recalculated the tolerances using current Meridian-class specs. She was right. 0.3 degrees. Enough to set up a resonance, enough to wear down the coil over time. He didn't say anything, just picked up his tools, loosened the housing, nudged the coupling back into true alignment. It took less than a minute. The vibration stopped. Not gradually, instantly. The motivator's hum went from a ragged edge to a clean, steady tone. Artemis updated the status. System efficiency increased by 2%. 2%. On a ship like the Meridian's Edge, that wasn't nothing. That was fuel saved. Stress reduced. Lifespan extended. James looked at Zara. How did you know? She was watching the motivator. Her head tilted slightly. Her ears still glowed. I was interfacing, she said. With the systems. On a quantum level, silence. Engineering was never silent, but right then it felt like it was. The only sound was the clean hum of the motivator and the faint buzz of the lights. Interfacing, not looking. Not guessing, connecting. James just stared. Rodriguez had his arms crossed. Elena was taking notes on her data pad, her expression unreadable. Zara turned to look at them. The ship speaks. You just have to know how to listen. And for the first time, James understood that they weren't dealing with a stowaway or a spy. They were dealing with something none of them were trained for. Something that didn't just use technology. It communed with it. Elena ran every scan she could think of. Non-invasive only. She wasn't about to cut into someone who hadn't given consent, even if that someone had glowing ears and spoke to ship systems. The initial readings came back almost human. Heart, lungs, circulatory system, all familiar. Almost. Then the details started to drift. Her auditory canals were the first real flag. They weren't just elongated on the outside. Inside, they were enlarged, restructured, woven through with extra neural tissue that connected directly to her brainstem. It wasn't decorative. It was functional. A secondary network like a built-in comms array. Then the brain activity. Standard encephalographic scans showed patterns that flickered in and out of phase. Spikes of energy that didn't correspond to any known neurological response. Elena recalibrated 3 times, thinking it was interference from the ship. It wasn't. The patterns were real. They fired across quantum frequencies, not metaphors. Actual quantum states. She cross-referenced the data with the bioluminescence readings from Zara's ears. They matched. Perfectly. Every time her neural activity spiked into those strange frequencies, the glow in her ears brightened. It wasn't a side effect. It was an indicator. A readout. Elena leaned back from the screen. Your ears. The light. It happens when you're thinking in a certain way, doesn't it? Zara was sitting on the medbay cot watching her. She'd been quiet through most of the scans. Cooperative. Calm. It happens when I interface, she said. Or when I see what? The barriers. Between layers of reality. They aren't invisible. Not to me, they're like structures. Walls made of light and mathematics. Sometimes I can feel them. Sometimes I can almost touch them. Elena just stared. Dimensional barriers. As tangible structures. That wasn't perception. That was something else entirely. She pulled up the full biological profile on the main display. Human-based genetics, 97% match. But the modifications? They were woven in at a cellular level. Enhancements, not mutations, not evolution. This was design. Someone had taken a human template and upgraded it, added quantum-capable neural pathways, built-in sensory equipment that could perceive reality on a fundamental level. The technology was beyond anything Elena had ever seen. Consortium R&D was good, but this was decades ahead, maybe more. This wasn't just advanced. This was a leap. You weren't born like this, Elena said. It wasn't a question. Zara shook her head. I don't remember being born. I remember waking up in a white room with people in suits. They talked about calibration, about thresholds. Elena let out a slow breath. Built or remade, a hybrid, human plus something nobody had a name for. She was about to run another comparative analysis when Zara spoke again. Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. It was the first time she'd sounded unsure. Are you going to turn me over to someone? The question hung in the air. Elena looked at her, not as a subject, not as a medical curiosity, as a person who was asking if she was about to be handed back to the people who'd built her. The medbay was silent except for the hum of the scanners. Elena didn't answer right away. She just looked at the readings on the screen, the proof of what Zara was, and what had been done to her. Artemis's voice cut through the medbay calm, crisp and detached. Proximity alert. Cargo drone on approach vector. No threat, standard procedure. Nothing to worry about. Just a routine drone bringing in supplies from a nearby outpost. Zara was sitting up, sipping water, looking more present than she had since they'd pulled her from the pod. Elena was running a final scan, talking softly about nutrient levels. Normal stuff. Or as normal as it gets when your patient has quantum-enhanced neurology and glowing ears. Then the alert tone sounded again, a short, sharp beep from the overhead speaker. Zara froze. The water pack slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a soft slap. Her eyes went wide, unfocused. She made a small, choked sound in the back of her throat. Then her hands flew to her head, fingers digging into her temples. She curled forward, a low moan escaping her lips. Elena dropped the scanner. Zara, what's wrong? But Zara wasn't hearing her. She was shaking, her whole body rigid. Words started pouring out of her, fast and desperate, in a language that made no sense. Guttural, clicking sounds mixed with soft melodic tones. Nothing in the ship's database recognized it. Nothing human. Her ears lit up. Not the faint glow from before. This was a burst of intense, brilliant light. It flooded the medbay, casting sharp, dancing shadows on the walls and equipment. The light pulsed in time with her ragged breathing, bright enough to make Elena squint. Through the gibberish, one phrase in clear universal broke through. She kept repeating it, her voice strained like she was fighting to hold on to it. Kai said to focus on the frequency, not the noise. Kai said to focus on the frequency, not the noise. Elena moved fast. She grabbed a sedative hypo from the tray, prepped it with hands that were steady but moving quicker than usual. I need to calm her down. Neural overload. Her readings are spiking into the red. She pressed the hypo against Zara's neck. There was a soft hiss. Zara's body went limp, the tension draining away. The glowing in her ears faded from a blinding white back to a soft, dying ember, then to nothing. The strange language stopped. She slumped against the cot, unconscious. The medbay was quiet again, just the hum of life support and Elena's own quick breaths. It took an hour for the sedative to wear off. Elena stayed by the cot, monitoring the readouts. When Zara's eyes fluttered open, she looked confused, then scared. She looked around the medbay like she was remembering where she was. What happened? She asked, her voice hoarse. The alert, Elena said gently. The drone. It triggered something. Zara was silent for a moment, processing. Then she spoke, her voice quiet. I remember. A man, Kai, he was teaching me. In a white room. He showed me how to see the barriers. How to find the stable frequencies in the chaos. She looked down at her hands. He was kind. His voice was calm. But the training, it was harsh, it hurt, like trying to learn how to breathe fire. He said I had to focus, to block out the noise and find the signal. She fell silent again, thinking. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was a scientist, a doctor, a jailer. I don't know where he is now, or if he's even alive. Elena didn't push. She just watched her, noting the way her hands trembled slightly. The memory was raw, painful. After a long moment, Zara looked up, her expression oddly vulnerable. She touched the side of her head, her fingers brushing the base of her ear. Are they glowing again? Artemis didn't waste time. The AI ran the audio from Zara's breakdown through every language database in known space. It took less than an hour to get a hit. The language-matched fragments recovered from a failed research outpost called Omega-7. The name alone made Rodriguez sit up straight. Omega-7 was a ghost story. Officially, it was decommissioned 18 months ago after a catastrophic containment breach. The official report was thin, vague. It mentioned a reactor malfunction, structural failure, standard cover-up language. Artemis dug deeper, accessing consortium archives that weren't exactly public. Buried in the logistical files, it found the timing. The station went dark exactly 18 months ago. The same amount of time Zara's pod had been drifting. The AI cross-referenced dates, cargo manifests, personnel logs. It painted a picture. Omega-7 wasn't just a research station. It was a black site lab, classified, top tier, the kind of place the consortium didn't put on maps. Their work was interdimensional mapping. Not theory, applied science. They were trying to punch holes in reality. To see what was on the other side, Artemis pulled up redacted reports. Words like subject losses and dimensional incursions popped up over and over. They weren't just studying other dimensions. They were trying to interact with them. And they were using people to do it. The logs mentioned enhanced personnel and neural bridging. It all clicked into place with a cold, logical finality. Zara was a product of that lab. Not a refugee. Not a survivor. A creation. Her design purpose was right there in the sanitized reports. She was a living quantum computer, a biological interface built to perceive and communicate across dimensional barriers. A bridge. Her entire physiology, the neural tissue in her ears, her ability to see reality's underlying structure. It was all by design. She was built to talk to things that weren't from here. The containment breach started to make a different kind of sense. It wasn't an accident. It was a failure of control. They'd opened a door or maybe just a window and something looked back, or came through. The logs were cagey, but the subtext was clear. They lost hold of the experiment. The station didn't just fail. It was overwhelmed. Rodriguez listened to Artemis's report in his quarters, the data streaming across his screen. He looked at the dates, the reports, the cold clinical language used to describe what they'd done to people. To Zara, she wasn't a weapon. She was a tool. A very advanced, very dangerous tool that its makers had dropped. The resolution was grim. They had a sentient being on their ship, who was also the most sophisticated piece of unauthorized technology in the sector. A walking, talking breach of about a dozen interstellar laws. And the people who made her had just realized she was missing. The priority message alert chimed on the main comm. It was a consortium relay signature. High encryption. Command-level authorization. Rodriguez stared at the blinking light on his console. This wasn't a casual check-in. This was a claim they knew, and they were calling to collect. Dr. Lydia Cross appeared on the screen, crisp and composed. She wore a high-collared consortium science division uniform, her hair pulled back tight. Her mouth was curved in a polite smile, but her eyes were flat. Cold. The kind of look you give a problematic subordinate. Not a fellow officer. Captain Rodriguez, she began, her voice smooth, practiced. The consortium thanks you for your service in recovering our property. Subject 7. Your diligence has not gone unnoticed. Rodriguez stood stiffly by the comms console. The rest of the crew was gathered behind him, a silent wall of resistance. Elena's jaw was set. James had his arms crossed. She has a name, Rodriguez said. It's Zara. Cross's smile didn't flicker. The construct is designated Subject 7. Patent number Gamma 77 Alpha. Registered to the Omega Research Division. Under Interstellar Treaty Code 114, Section 8. Lost or misappropriated research assets are subject to immediate repossession by their legal owners. We'll be dispatching a retrieval team to your coordinates. She's not an asset, Elena cut in, stepping forward. She's a person, sentient, conscious. She has a right to... Subject 7 is a patented construct, Cross interrupted, her tone losing its false warmth. A complex assembly of biological and quantum components. Highly valuable intellectual property. She does not have rights. She has operational parameters. The room felt colder, Artemis was silent on the comms, but Rodriguez could feel the AI's attention, recording every word. "We've spoken with her," James said. "She's not a machine. She's scared. She remembers things. She has a past." Cross's eyes narrowed slightly. Previous subjects were unstable, dangerous. Their emotional responses were design flaws, glitches. Subject 5 experienced a neural cascade and had to be terminated after breaching containment. Subject 9 was deployed as a dimensional liaison. It was lost during an incident. Cross-reality contamination. The cleanup cost millions. She let that hang in the air. The fate of the others, not people. Failed products. Subject 7 is the most successful iteration, Cross continued. The most stable. And by far the most valuable. Her safe return is a priority for the consortium. Her continued absence constitutes a significant financial and security risk. Rodriguez shook his head. "We're not turning her over to be dismantled, or studied, or whatever you people do." For the first time, Cross's smile vanished completely. Her face went stern, official. "Captain, understand your position. Harboring consortium property is a direct violation of interstellar law. It is theft. It is also a breach of security protocols pertaining to classified biotechnology. You and your crew will be held personally liable. This is not a request. It is a lawful order for the return of stolen property." She leaned slightly toward the screen, her image sharp and unblinking. "Stand by for coordinates and docking procedures for the transfer. Do not attempt further contact with the subject. Do not attempt to interfere. Consortium jurisdiction applies here. Cross out." The screen went dark. The comms light blinked off. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the ever-present hum of the ship, which suddenly felt a lot quieter, a lot smaller. They'd just been threatened by the most powerful political entity in 6 sectors. Over a woman they'd found drifting in a dead pod. A woman who was, legally speaking, a piece of stolen equipment. Rodriguez looked at his crew. Their faces were grim, resolute. They'd all heard what happened to Subject 5. Terminated. And Subject 9. Lost. They weren't giving her back. The call ended. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of what they'd just been told. Zara had been standing near the back of the bridge listening. She'd heard every word, heard the term. Subject 7, it wasn't a name. It was a designation. A barcode. She went very still. Her hands, which had been loosely at her sides, clenched into tight fists. Her breathing hitched, then stopped for a second. It was like watching a system crash in slow motion. The calm, composed mask she'd worn since waking up shattered. Her face didn't crumple in sadness. It went blank with a kind of horrific recognition. Memories didn't trickle back. They flooded. A violent, unstoppable cascade of images and sensations she'd been conditioned to forget. White rooms, cold tables, needles. The constant hum of machines tuned to frequencies that made her teeth ache. They weren't trying to teach her. They were calibrating her, tuning her like an instrument. Her neural conditioning, the programming that kept her emotions flat and her responses predictable, fractured under the strain. The walls it built came down all at once. She remembered the purpose behind the pain. She was a bridge, a living conduit designed to perceive and interact with realities that existed layered over their own. Her entire existence was a tool, a means to an end. Her human emotions were seen as static, interference that degraded her function. They had to be suppressed, neutralized. Dr. Cross's face surfaced in her mind, clear and sharp. Not from the view screen, but from the White Room. Younger perhaps, but with the same cold eyes. She was the one who oversaw the empathy protocols. She was the one who called emotional responses system errors. Zara remembered the woman's voice, calm and detached, explaining that attachment compromised clarity. That fear created quantum feedback. They didn't want a person. They wanted a perfectly tuned receiver. Zara's body began to tremble, a fine, constant vibration that looked more machine than human. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it didn't help. The glow in her ears returned, but it wasn't the soft light from before. This was a harsh, rhythmic pulse like a distress beacon or a warning siren made of light. It flashed in time with her racing heart, casting frantic shadows across the deck. She looked up at the crew. Rodriguez, Elena, James. They were staring at her, their expressions a mix of concern and alarm. She could see they wanted to help, but they had no idea what was happening inside her head. "The dam had broken, I remember," she said. Her voice was raw, stripped of all its former calm. It was a scratchy, broken thing. I remember what I am, what I was made to do. She took a shaky breath, her glowing eyes wide with a terror that was entirely, devastatingly human. And I remember what I can break if I'm not careful, if I lose control. The pulse from her ears intensified, the light so bright it was painful to look at directly. The ship's ambient hum seemed to waver for a second, a barely perceptible dip in power. She looked at them, her expression one of pure, undiluted horror. Not for herself, for them. Just now, she whispered. When the memories came, I almost did it. I almost unmade the air in this room. I felt it fray, at the edges. I nearly killed you all, just by remembering. The admission hung in the air, more terrifying than any weapon. Her power wasn't something she turned on. It was something she fought to keep contained. And her own mind, her own pain, was the biggest threat of all. The glow in her ears pulsed, a relentless, alarming rhythm of light and fear. Artemis worked fast. The AI sliced through the Omega-7 encryption layers like they were old cargo manifest. The station's final logs weren't complete, just fragments, corrupted data, bursts of audio and text salvaged from the wreckage. But they were enough. They told a story the consortium had tried very hard to bury. The early logs were triumphant, excited. They talked about successful contact. Not with aliens. With alternate realities, dimensions layered over our own, close enough to touch if you had the right tools, the right senses. They weren't just theorizing. They were mapping. They'd found a way to peek behind the curtain of reality. The methodology was there, buried in technical jargon. They were using human genetic material as a base, building living quantum computers, biological interfaces that could perceive and interpret cross-dimensional data. They weren't building machines. They were growing people, modifying them, turning them into bridges. The logs called them subjects, numbered them. Their value was measured in signal clarity and stability. Then the tone shifted. The entries got shorter, more frantic. They'd breached containment. Not a physical breach, a dimensional one. They'd opened a channel and something came through. Or some things. The logs described entities that didn't conform to three-dimensional space. They were two-dimensional. Concepts given form, beings of pure energy and mathematics, and they were hungry. They consumed energy. They consumed matter. They didn't attack, they just absorbed. The researchers panicked. Their protocols were designed for theoretical, non-native biological entities, things with weight and shape. Not for this. Not for walking equations that could phase through walls and drain power cores. Their weapons were useless. Their containment fields flickered and died. The station was being unmade from the inside out, and that's where Zara's name appeared. Not as a cause, as a solution. A failed one. The logs noted that Subject 7 demonstrated an affinity for the entities. She could communicate with them. Not with words, with quantum frequencies. She tried to calm them, to reason with them, to send them back. But there were too many. The breach was too wide. The researchers' own protocols were working against her. They'd designed her to be a passive receiver, a tool, not a soldier, not a diplomat. The final log entry was a single audio file, a man's voice ragged with stress and failing oxygen. Subjects lost. Containment failed. The constructs are not responding to command. They're listening to her, but it's not enough. Evacuating all non-essential personnel. Initiating core overload. Maybe the blast will seal the rift. Subject 7 is missing. Pod Bay 4 is open. Gods, I hope she made it. The screen went silent. The story was clear. Zara wasn't the monster. She was the one they'd thrown at the monsters. Their last desperate attempt to clean up their own mess. She'd tried to help. She'd failed, and she'd run. She'd gotten in a pod and launched herself into the void just as the station tore itself apart around her. Rodriguez looked away from the screen. He looked at his crew. Elena's face was pale. James looked like he wanted to hit something. They'd all heard it. The truth. She wasn't a weapon. She was a survivor. A victim of an experiment that went catastrophically wrong. He didn't call a meeting. Didn't consult Artemis. He just made the decision. It felt like the only one left. We're not giving her up, he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. They want to call her property. I'm calling her a refugee. She stays. Under our protection, it was that simple and that complicated. They were now officially harboring a fugitive from the most powerful corporation in known space. A fugitive who was also technically stolen goods. But to Rodriguez, she was just a person. One who needed a place to be safe. The law could argue with him later. Rodriguez had a plan. It was flimsy, old, and it relied on a loophole most people forgot existed. The Colonial Protection Accords. A dusty piece of legislation from the first wave of expansion, written when the idea of personhood was still being debated by philosophers and lawyers. It was simple. It granted sanctuary to any sentient being who requested asylum. It didn't specify origin. It didn't require a homeworld. It just said being. He was going to use it. He opened the channel to Dr. Cross. She appeared on screen, her expression already impatient. She expected a surrender. Rodriguez didn't give her one. Under the Colonial Protection Accords, Article 12, we are granting Zara asylum. She has requested protection. We are providing it. Cross's smile was tight, condescending. The accords do not apply to patented property, Captain. Subject 7 is a construct. Intellectual property. She is not a being in any legal sense. The courts have ruled on this before. You are in violation of... That's when Artemis glitched. Not a major failure. Not a system collapse. Just a convenient, perfectly timed data corruption in the identity verification subroutine. The ship's official logs flickered. For a split second, Zara's file went blank. Then it repopulated. Not as Subject 7, not as a patented asset. The new entry was simple. Zara, survivor, recovered from derelict pod in Sector Gamma 7, origin unknown, status asylum seeker. Artemis had rewritten her history. It was a clean legal fiction, stamped with the ship's official seal. The AI's voice came over the internal comm, quiet. For the crew only. Identity verification complete. Asylum seeker status confirmed. Rodriguez didn't look at the screen. He looked at Cross. Our records show a rescued survivor requesting sanctuary. The accords are clear. We are within our rights. Cross's composure cracked. Her eyes narrowed. This is absurd. Your records are fabricated. My team will be there in 6 hours. Stand down and prepare for transfer. Rodriguez shook his head. He felt the weight of his crew behind him. Elena, arms crossed, her jaw set. James, standing straight, his usual casual posture gone. They were a wall. A united front. You can file complaints. You can send lawyers. You can send every bureaucrat in the consortium. We're not turning her over. She's not property. She's a person. And we don't surrender people to be taken apart. Or turned into weapons. The words hung in the air. There was no negotiation left. It was a statement of fact. A line drawn. Cross stared at him. Her polite mask was gone completely. Her face was cold, hard anger. She didn't threaten again. Didn't argue. She just said, "This is not over, Captain." Then she terminated the call. The screen went black, silence on the bridge. The threat was still out there. A retrieval team was still coming. Lawyers were still being summoned. But for now they had a win. A small, shaky, legal victory built on an old law and a helpful glitch. Rodriguez let out a long breath. He turned to his crew. They were all watching him, waiting. The relief was there, but it was thin, tempered by what came next. "All right," he said. His voice was tired. Now the real work begins. They had a sentient, quantum-powered refugee on board who didn't know her own strength. The most powerful corporation in the sector ready to come down on them, and a legal argument that would probably collapse under its own weight the first time it saw a real judge. They'd bought time. Nothing more. But on the edge of known space, time was everything. Her power was real. Not a theory. Not a maybe. And it was a threat to everyone on the ship if she couldn't control it. Elena and James took point. Their job was simple. Help Zara understand her limits. Help her find the edges of what she could do without breaking everything around her. It sounded straightforward, it wasn't. They started in the cargo bay, plenty of space, nothing critical. Just storage containers and old equipment. Elena set up sensors. James talked her through the basics. Just try to feel the ship's energy flow. The power grid. Don't push, just listen. Zara tried. She closed her eyes. Her ears glowed with a soft, focused light. For a second, it worked. She described the current moving through the conduits in the walls, the hum of the life support, the dormant drive coils. Then she flinched. A wave of frustration. A spike of fear. She lost her grip. The air in the center of the bay wavered, like heat haze on a desert planet. Then it collapsed. A localized gravity well-formed, small but intense. A crate of spare parts screeched as it was yanked across the deck, metal grinding on metal. The sensors screamed. Elena hit the emergency cutoff. The distortion vanished. The crate slammed back down. Silence. Zara was on her knees, breathing hard, her ears pulsing with erratic light. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. They tried again a day later. In an isolated section of the outer hull. James wanted to see if she could sense structural integrity. Just feel the plates, the seams. Tell me if you sense any weak points. She focused. Her glow was steadier this time, more controlled. She pointed to a join near the starboard maneuvering thruster. There. The alignment is soft. Not right. James ran a manual diagnostic. The plate was fine, but when he looked at the quantum level scan, he saw it. The molecular structure of the alloy was slightly out of phase. Not enough to cause a failure. Not yet. But it was like the metal was vibrating in two different dimensions at once. She hadn't just sensed it. Her perception had altered it. Just by looking too hard. They pulled back. No more direct interfacing. They needed to understand the trigger. The pattern became clear fast. It wasn't about concentration. It was about emotion. Every accident coincided with a spike in her emotional state. Fear, frustration, even excitement. Her abilities were tied directly to how she felt. The suppression conditioning the consortium had drilled into her had worked. It had kept her stable by keeping her numb. It had also capped her power, limited what she could do. Now that she was feeling things again, real things, human things, her control was gone. The power had nowhere to go but out. She had to learn to feel without losing control, to let the emotions exist without letting them take over. It was exhausting work. Terrifying. Every session ended with her drained, shaking, apologizing for existing. She saw herself as a bomb waiting to go off, a danger they were foolish to keep around. After one particularly bad attempt, left a whole section of the environmental systems flickering for an hour. She just sat on the deck, head in her hands. She looked defeated. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'm just too broken to be safe. Elena had to go check the systems. James stayed. He didn't say anything at first. Just sat down next to her. The deck was cool. The hum of the ship was the only sound. He handed her a water pack. She took it, her hands still trembling slightly. You're not broken, he said finally. His voice was quiet. You're learning. Nobody gets this right the first time. Or the 10th. She didn't look at him. I could have decompressed the bay. I could have phased the hull into nothing. But you didn't, he said. You pulled it back. Every time you've pulled it back. That's the part that matters. She was silent for a long time. Then she leaned her head back against the bulkhead, closing her eyes. The glow in her ears had faded to almost nothing. Just a faint, steady light. Like embers. It's just so loud in my head sometimes, she whispered. All the frequencies, all the layers, and now all the feelings. It's a lot. James didn't have an answer for that. He just sat there with her. Sometimes that's all you can do. She saw herself as a weapon, a failed experiment, a thing built wrong and let loose in a world she didn't understand. Every time she looked in a reflective surface, she saw the evidence, the elongated ears, the faint, ever-present glow that pulsed with her mood, the face that was almost human, but not quite. Hideous. That was the word she used. Not different. Not unique. Hideous. They were in the mess hall. Late. The ship was on night cycle. Lights dimmed. The only sound, the low thrum of the life support and the soft clink of a cup as James stirred his coffee. He was watching her. Not like the others. Sometimes did, with caution, with that flicker of fear they tried to hide. He was just watching. His expression was quiet, thoughtful, maybe even a little sad. She put her own cup down. The liquid inside barely moved. Her hands were steady now. That was something, at least. "Why do you do that?" she asked. Her voice was softer than she intended. "Do what?" he said. "Look at me like that." He didn't look away. "Like what?" She took a breath. It was hard to say. Harder than facing down a gravity well or a phased hull plate. "Like I'm not what I am." She gestured to her own face, a quick, frustrated motion. "The ears, the glow, the fact that I could accidentally unmake the air you're breathing. I see it in the scans. I'm a collection of flaws, a danger, a thing that shouldn't exist. So why do you look at me like you find me beautiful?" She said the last word like it was a joke. A bitter, impossible joke. James didn't answer right away. He took a slow sip of his coffee, put the cup down, looked at her. Really looked. He listened. That was the thing about James. He was good at listening. He heard the words under the words. "You're right," he said finally. "You're not human, not entirely." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "But that's not what I see." He paused, choosing his words with care. "I see someone who makes jokes when the pressure is so high the rest of us can't breathe. I see someone who, 5 minutes after nearly phasing a hole in the ship, is apologizing for taking up too much space. I see someone whose first instinct is always to ask if everyone else is safe, even when she's the one falling apart." He shook his head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "The ears, the glow, they're just parts, they're not you." He met her eyes. His were steady, clear. "No, you're a treasure." The word hung in the quiet air. It didn't make sense. A treasure was something precious, found, protected. "A treasure," he repeated, his voice firm. "Because you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Not despite what you can do, not because of it, because of who you are in here." He tapped his own chest, over his heart. "The consortium built a tool. They got a person, a good one." Zara just stared at him. The words didn't fit. They were too big for the space she'd made for herself. She looked down at her hands. The familiar faint light from her ears usually came from fear, or focus, or some unwanted interface with the ship's systems. This time, it was different. The glow that came wasn't bright or pulsing. It was a soft, warm, steady light. A gentle radiance that felt calm. For the first time, the light wasn't a symptom of her condition. It was just a part of her. And for the first time, that felt like it might be okay. The debris field of Omega-7 was a graveyard of broken metal and frozen gases, a silent testament to the station's violent end. The Meridian's edge moved through it slowly, sensors on high alert collecting what data they could. It was supposed to be a quick, quiet pass. It wasn't. Artemis picked up the anomaly first. A flicker on the long-range scanners. An energy signature that didn't match any known radiation profile. It wasn't radioactive decay. It wasn't residual power. It was something else. Something that pulsed with a strange rhythmic logic like a heartbeat made of math. Then the external sensors on the starboard hull registered contact. Multiple contacts. But there was nothing on the visual feeds. No physical objects, no debris. The hull stress indicators began to climb. A low harmonic vibration started, a sound that wasn't a sound, felt more than heard. It set teeth on edge. Artemis ran the data. Entities detected. Composition unknown. Energy-based. Non-corporeal. They are attached to the outer hull. They appear to be feeding, draining minor systems power. Rodriguez hit the tactical display. Target them. Low-yield burst. Scare them off. The point defense lasers fired. Bright lances of energy sliced through the vacuum. They passed right through the sensor signatures. No effect. The vibrations intensified. Console lights flickered across the bridge. "They don't exist in 3 dimensions, Elena said, staring at her science station. "Not fully. They're 2-dimensional. Concepts given form. Energy patterns. You can't shoot an idea. The ship's systems were starting to glitch. Environmental control stuttered. Lights dimmed. The entities were hungry. They consumed the ship's energy, but also its order, its structure. They were unmaking it slowly, logically. Zara had been watching from the corner, her hands clenched. Her ears were glowing, a steady, anxious light. She stepped forward. They're from there. From the breach. I know them, or I know their language. Rodriguez looked at her. Can you talk to them? She nodded. I have to go out there. They won't understand the ship. They'll just see a source, a thing. I have to make them see us. They suited her up. No weapons, just a basic EVA suit and a comlink. James checked her seals twice. His face was grim. You sure about this? No, she said. Her voice was quiet but clear over the comm. But it's the only way, the airlock cycled. She pushed off into the black. Outside, the void was silent. The debris field stretched out around her, a million pieces of a broken dream. She oriented herself towards the starboard hull, where the sensors showed the entities clustered. She didn't use her mouth. She closed her eyes. The glow from her ears intensified, becoming a brilliant, focused beacon of light in the darkness. She began to broadcast. Not words. A series of quantum frequencies. A language of pure information, of structure and relationship. She showed them the ship. Not as a thing to consume, as a home. She showed them the people inside. Their fears. Their hopes. Their desire to not be a threat. She offered them a gift. A map. A safe passage away from this graveyard. Towards a quiet, empty sector where the energy was free and wild. She offered them a direction. A choice. The vibration stopped. The flickering lights on the bridge steadied. The sensor readings changed. The entities detached from the hull. For a moment they were visible. Not as monsters, as patterns of light intricate and beautiful, swirling around her in the void like a silent dance. Then they dissipated. They didn't vanish. They unfolded. They stretched into the fabric of space itself and were gone, following the path she'd drawn for them. The airlock cycled again. Zara stepped back inside, pulling off her helmet. Her face was pale, drenched in sweat. She was breathing hard, leaning against the bulkhead for support. She looked exhausted, completely drained, but she was smiling. A small, tired, real smile. They were just lost, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They just needed someone to show them the way. The consortium didn't give up. Their messages kept coming. Legal threats, political pressure, warnings about extradition and asset forfeiture. But something shifted. The colonial government, usually quick to buckle under consortium weight, pushed back. Maybe it was Rodriguez's reputation. Maybe it was the story of what happened at Omega 7, leaked in bits and pieces. Maybe they just didn't like being told what to do. They backed the Meridian's edge. They affirmed the asylum claim. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a shield. A thin one. Then the offer came. Not from the consortium, from a safe colony on the fringe. A place so remote and independent that even corporate lawyers hesitated to send nasty letters. They offered Zara transport. A new identity. A quiet life where she could disappear. No more fighting. No more looking over her shoulder. It was the smart move. The safe move for her. For the crew. For everyone. Rodriguez laid it out for her in his quarters. No pressure. Just the facts. It's a good offer, he said. You'd be free there. Really free, she listened. She looked at the star chart he showed her. A dot in a quiet sector. Green skies. Peaceful. She looked from Rodriguez to Elena, to James leaning in the doorway. She looked past them, through the viewport at the ship itself. The Meridian's edge. The hum of its engines was a sound she knew now. The smell of recycled air and machine oil was familiar. This cramped, worn-out ship had become the first place she'd ever felt like she belonged. The tension was a physical thing in the room. The smart choice was right there. A clean escape. A life without fear. She shook her head. No. The word was quiet. Final. My fight isn't out there, she said, nodding toward the star chart. It's here. With you. She looked at each of them. They made me to be a bridge. A thing that connects. I'm not going to run from that. But I'm not going to be their tool either. I'll be a bridge on my terms. I'll choose where I lead. There was no dramatic speech, no grand declaration, just a choice, simple and clear. Rodriguez nodded once. All right then. Your crew, Elena smiled. James didn't say anything. He just looked at her, and the look said everything. Support, acceptance, maybe something more. The resolution was instant. They closed the channel to the colony. The offer was declined. Rodriguez sent a short, polite refusal. Then he turned to the ship's comm. Attention all hands. Zara is staying. She's one of us. Treat her accordingly. The response wasn't cheers. It was quieter than that. A few nods from the crew on the bridge. A couple of thumbs up from engineering over the comm. A sense of rightness. They'd been protecting her. Now they were standing with her. Even Artemis complied. The AI, which had flagged her as a threat from the first moment, processed the command. A soft chime echoed through the ship. Biometric signature added to core security protocol. Access granted. Welcome, Zara. It was official. She wasn't a passenger. She wasn't a refugee. She was crew. The moment held, heavy with the weight of what came next. Then Zara looked around the room, her ears glowing with a soft, steady light. A small smile touched her lips. So, she said, her voice dry, who's translating the next interdimensional entity that tries to eat the ship? Because I think I've done my share. A laugh broke the tension. James snorted. Elena shook her head. Rodriguez just grinned. It was a joke. A bad one. But it was hers. And it meant she was home. Her abilities became something else. Not just a danger to be managed, but a tool to be used. A new way of seeing the ship's path through the black. The Meridian's edge often traveled through unstable space. Gravitational eddies, quantum foam. Regions where reality got a little thin. Standard navigation relied on charts and probability. Zara offered something different. Perception. She learned to use her unique sight to chart courses. She'd sit on the bridge, her eyes closed, and feel the space ahead. Not with sensors. With something deeper. She could sense the subtle tears in the fabric of reality. The gravitational ripples that would shake the ship apart. The quiet pockets of calm space that didn't show up on any map. She'd call out course corrections. A slight adjustment to port, a 5% reduction in speed for the next half-light year. Every single use of her power was a calculated risk. To perceive that deeply, she had to open herself up, to interface with the universe on a fundamental level. It was a balancing act. Too little focus and the data was useless. Too much and she risked another cascade, another accidental gravity well or phased bulkhead. She had to hold her emotions in perfect check, a state of calm focus that was exhausting to maintain. It was like walking a tightrope over an abyss, blindfolded, with everyone's life tied to your balance. She began to see her past in a new light. The harsh training, the brutal conditioning, the endless drills in the white rooms of Omega-7. It wasn't just cruelty. It wasn't just making a tool. It was, in its own twisted way, preparation. They'd been trying to build a perfect navigator for realities nobody else could see. They'd failed to make her a slave, but they'd succeeded in giving her the skills. Now she was choosing how to use them. The failure was theirs. The training was hers. The crew's trust became absolute. It wasn't blind faith. It was earned. Mile by mile, they saw the results. Smoother transits. Less wear on the engines. Avoided hazards that would have taken days to repair. Rodriguez stopped double-checking her suggested courses. Elena stopped monitoring her neural activity during navigation sessions. James would just nod and make the adjustment when she spoke. Her instincts became their primary plotting computer. Her quiet voice from the corner of the bridge carried more weight than Artemis's most confident projection. She became their most valuable asset. But not a weapon, a guide, a living compass pointing the way through the chaos. Her value shifted. It was no longer in what the consortium had designed her to do. Bridge dimensions, communicate with entities, be a tool for expansion. Her value was in what she chose to do. Protect her ship, protect her crew, find the safe path home. The glow of her ears changed its meaning on the bridge. It was no longer a warning sign, a flare of danger that made people tense up. It became a welcome sight. A signal that work was being done. That Zara was at her post, seeing the unseen, guiding them through the dark. It was the light on the dashboard that told you everything was running right. One evening, in the quiet of the observation deck, she tried to explain it to James. She tried to describe what she saw. The layers of reality, the frequencies, the way space wasn't empty but full of structures and currents. He listened, frowning, trying to understand. She took his hand. "Don't look with your eyes," she said softly. The light is just noise. Listen with everything else. Feel for the hum. The song of the ship. The vibration of the deck under your feet. That's a frequency. Now feel past it. He closed his eyes. He tried. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then he felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible thrumming. A second layer under the ship's familiar hum. It was like hearing a second melody in a piece of music for the first time. His eyes snapped open. I felt that, Zara smiled. That's the quantum foam. The background radiation of creation. You just perceived a tiny piece of it. It was a basic lesson. The very first step. But for a human, it was a leap. And for her, it was a beginning. The start of sharing what she was instead of hiding it. The story traveled. On the fringe colonies where the consortium's grip was weak and independent spirits thrived, people talked. It wasn't a news bulletin. It was a quiet legend passed in cargo holds and cantinas. A story about a ship that said no. A crew that protected one of their own, a woman who was more than human, who'd been called property and chose to be a person instead. It was a story that asked a simple, dangerous question. What makes someone human? Is it the genetics or is it the choices they make? The consortium never stopped wanting her back. Their legal threats became a constant low-grade nuisance like background radiation. Their reach, however, only stretched so far. Out on the rim, their lawyers were just voices on a screen. Their enforcement teams were wary of starting a fight with a ship that had a colonial government's backing and a growing reputation. The risk of a messy public incident was too high. So they watched. They waited. They bided their time. Others were watching too. Not corporations. People. They started showing up at ports where the Meridian's edge was docked. Not crowds. Just a few here and there. Men and women who stood a little too still, whose eyes saw a little too much. Some had subtle mods, neural interfaces that glinted under the light, synthetic organs that hummed faintly. Others just had a look, the look of someone who'd been remade for a purpose they didn't choose. They'd heard the stories. They came looking for Subject 7. They expected to find a weapon, a symbol of rebellion, a tool to be used again but for a better cause. They found a community instead. They found Zara working in engineering with James, her hands smudged with grease, laughing at a bad joke. They found her on the bridge, her eyes closed, guiding the ship through a nebula with quiet, confident directions. They found a crew that treated her not as a secret asset, but as their navigator, their friend. She didn't give speeches. She didn't lead a movement. She just lived. She showed them what it looked like to take what you were made to be and turn it into what you wanted to be. She became a symbol, but not the kind anyone expected, not of what had been taken from her in those white rooms, but of what she'd given back to herself. Her past was a warning about how far people would go in the name of progress. Her future was a blueprint for how to take that progress and make it your own. She was living proof that personhood isn't something you're born with or manufactured with. It's something you earn. Every day. With every choice to be kinder, to be braver, to stay when it would be easier to run. Late one shift, the ship was quiet. Most of the crew was asleep. Zara and James were on the observation deck, watching the stars slide past. They weren't a scientist and his subject. They weren't an engineer and a navigator. They were just two people side by side, comfortable in a silence that didn't need to be filled. The light from the nebula outside cast a soft blue glow across the deck, mixing with the gentle, steady light from her ears. He looked at her, not at the stars. He'd told her she was beautiful before, and she'd argued. She'd listed her flaws like a manifest. This time he just said it again, simple, direct. You're beautiful. She didn't look away from the viewport, but she didn't correct him. She didn't disagree. She let the words sit there in the quiet. And for the first time in the reflection of the thick glass, she saw herself not as a collection of parts, but as a whole. The ears, the glow, the strength, the fear, the jokes in the dark, all of it. She didn't say anything. She just leaned her head against his shoulder, a small, content sigh escaping her lips. She finally believed him. The most compelling thing about her was never the glow of her ears or the way she could bend reality with a thought. It was the quiet joke offered in the middle of a crisis, the steady hand on a friend's shoulder, the choice to stand her ground for a crew that had become her family. She redefined power not by what she could break, but by what she chose to build. Next time something from beyond the void shows up, someone else is on translation duty. She's earned a break.